Uyanga Bold. How are you doing?
Hi, Sean. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Uh, so we're Facebook friends, and I started paying close attention to a lot of the stuff that you've been doing, and I got really interested in it. Besides the fact that I have a 7-year-old, and we had a movie night. We watched the movie Mulan, and you worked on that movie.
Yes, I did. I was fortunate enough to sing, provide some vocals for the movie. Yeah.
And there's even like a sample library that you've done in. So you've done like a lot of movies, video games, and all kinds of stuff. Really, really fascinating. So, my first question is just about, how you got started, maybe what kind of music you were initially interested in, and then sort of how you sort of parlayed that and sort of used those skills to develop the kind of career that you have.
Okay, that's a great question, and it's a really kind of a long question to start from the beginning to bring it to here. When I was younger, I would hear traditional Mongolian singing on TV, on the radio, right? It would always be playing in the background. So it's in my DNA, it's in my culture, right? And it's that kind of very emotional, cinematic sound, right? That sounds almost wailing, plaintive, or noble, many different qualities to it, and with ornaments, right, that are very unique. And so, of course, when I was a teenager, when I came to Berklee College of Music to study and get my bachelor's, I was interested in American music and jazz and world music, and it was a really incredible experience for study, because there's such an international place, people from all over the world, and were attending. And I used to have a neo soul band, R&B band, and Afrobeat band, all this kind of stuff. And then people would tell me, "Why do you do this? You should incorporate your Mongolian flavors to your music, because then it would be really interesting. That's what we want to hear, because it's rare, and people want rare things, right?" And at the time, I believe it was the first Mongolian, so there was a lot of interest around that. And so I happened to tune a guitar to fourths, and was playing it in this way that was traditional sounding, and I wrote this piece that was kind of warriors riding, and with wailing vocals on top. They were like, and someone heard it and said, "Oh, this is exactly the kind of vocals that we were looking for to play at this Boston Symphony Hall opening for Alan Silvestri," and it was with the Rhythm of the Universe. And I ended up on stage as one of the vocal soloists, and someone happened to see me in the crowd who was organizing this performance in Bucharest, Romania, and they invited me to perform there with the symphony orchestra there. And that video garnered, by now, I believe, 18 million views. And so it kind of propelled my career forward, and people would just naturally reach out to me without me having to run after gigs so much, right? And so I was very fortunate in that regard. And of course, I had to work a lot, had to experiment a lot, had to make a lot of sacrifices, and, fell on my face quite a few times, many times, in fact. And also as an immigrant in America, as a woman in the industry, there's a lot of things that, kind of intersected, and for me to be here, yeah, I'm grateful to be here, and it's been a long road, and yeah, I'll leave it at this. Short, short
Yeah,
and sweet.
yeah. It's it was a kind of a big question. I realized that most of the musicians that I've had on my show have been jazz musicians, because I'm heavily networked in that part of the industry, I guess. Also have had academics and politicians and all kinds of different kinds of people. But since I'm a musician, most of the folks that I've had have been musicians. And one thing that was interesting about you is that, I've not, since most of the folks were like jazz musicians or classical musicians or something, I've not had someone like you on the show. So I think that first question is good to kind of maybe bring things current so we can maybe discuss a few of the things that we started discussing before we started rolling.
Yeah.
One thing you were talking about is you said you read a book and it discussed, let's see, what was this? You can either be I think I started out by saying something like, you said something about how many instruments I play.
Yeah.
And I want to work.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, so it's been quite utilitarian. Me adding instruments has been it's been a matter of the kind of work that I want,
mm-hmm.
and a particular skill that makes me more marketable and able to work more easily.
Yes. You make a great point there, and I believe it was an article, and it talked about there are two ways that you can one can be successful in the top of their field at what they do, which is the first option is say you play one instrument, or you are an athlete, or whatever it is, you do that one thing, like Bruce Lee, you do that one kick 100,000 times, right? Then you become superhuman at that one thing. But the competition is so fierce, right? And it's so hard to be that 0.001%. That's one way to be successful and be in demand, right? And the second method, which is a little easy perhaps, but it still, requires a lot of work and dedication, is to be the top 10 or the top 5% of a few different things. And the way that you integrate them, the way you approach them, right, makes you a unique asset to a project or an endeavor, right? So I can see that for you, being a one-man band practically, right, it has served you well, right? And for myself, I have over 50 instruments in my home, and it's not that I'm play incredibly well at them, but I play enough to loop with them. I play enough to create a piece I can sing over, and my vocal work just takes me. In 1 week, I might be recording pop, I might be writing in a Russian lullaby in pop style, or I might be singing shamanic things. I might be singing opera. I might be and that's the kind of versatility that that has been required of me, right? So if they ask you, can you do this? I just say yes.
Yeah, that's the powerful word right there. Yes, because mm-hmm. It will lead you to things that you will never get the opportunity to do if you say no.
Mm-hmm.
If you say no, then that's the end. If you say yes, you don't know where it might lead, right?
Yeah.
And there's a movie, Jim Carrey movie called Yes Man, and in the movie, he has to say yes to everything, and that's the sort of, and it puts him in all kinds of kind of strange situations and weird things, and it's Jim Carrey, so he's a great physical comedian, physical actor, so there's all kinds of stuff that happens. But it also leads him to the person that he.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
Him to the person that he ends up in a relationship with. It leads him to, experiencing all kinds of things that he wouldn't have experienced otherwise. I did a somewhat inspired by that movie. I did a panel discussion. I'm the director of jazz studies at Ohio State, and I did a panel discussion, and the panel had, mostly musicians, but different kinds of musicians, and then there was a dancer, my wife. She was on the panel also, and the name of the discussion, I did a presentation, and then the panel, it was The Power of Yes, developing a skill set for a career in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. So no one is born with experience. Right? That's the one thing that everyone is born equal in that way.
Yeah.
And the difference often is the opportunities to do things, those experiences. So like if you say yes, and okay, well, I have this skill set that at least puts me in the ballpark. Mm. I'm not going to say yes to something that, I'm not going to say yes to something that I have no skill set at all in, but I could say yes to things that, it's music, it's X, Y, and Z. I can kind of see how this was going to work. And if I've done that specific thing or not, it's not an issue. You have to, you're taking a risk. You have to be willing to do that. I want to ask you, how important has it been in your career to say yes?
That's a great question. There's a book on this that's called The Surrender Experiment, and there's a man who decided to say yes to everything that the universe throws at him, and it has led him to this series of interesting places, and he writes about it, and there's something to be said about it. But I also believe in a friend likes. He said, a quick no is better than a slow maybe. Right. Yes.
Oh, right.
So there's these two ends of the spectrum, and in between, right? There's hesitancy and indecision, and that's where pain is, right? That's where the worry is, right? So just saying yes and then going forward, just say no and don't regret it, right? That has been a practice and a lesson for me. There are many instances where it's in the realm of music, but I'm not quite sure. I haven't done it perhaps before, and we experimented and try out, and it ends up becoming the most amazing thing, right? And so the power of yes has been very good to me, and the power of no, when it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel aligned. And I think the more what is successful? That's a question that I want to ask you in return. What is success for you, right? But depending on how successful we are, I think that's when we have more bandwidth to say no also, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting, so you just finished, your college degree. Okay, I'm ready to see what's out here. I have a light bill that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pay right now. If anybody asks me anything related to music at all, obviously the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because you have to say yes. Right. Mm-hmm. So it seems like at the beginning of people's career, as they're sort of figuring it out, you have to say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a choice. You
Yeah.
must say yes. And then hopefully what happens as you become better and better at the things that only you can do, you can start to sort of, weed out things that you want, like you said, to say no to.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can, as much as possible, get to the place where you're special, where you're doing pretty much only the stuff that you want to do.
Yeah.
Now, very few of us have gotten exactly to that point yet, but you were asking about success.
What is success? Yeah.
Yeah, what is success?
For you?
Yeah.
But can I just jump in there before we switch to what is success?
Sure.
Yeah, the saying yes to when we're just starting out. I'm sure you have incredible stories of saying yes to things you're wondering, what am I doing here? But it pays the bills, And I used to be, when I was in, I had just after college, right? You're out of school, and I was in these general business bands, right? And you're just doing covers for 4 or 5 hours, and I remember the band asked me to sing "Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy," and I thought, I'm sure it's a great song. It's just something about that song like made me think, what do you do? Where are you going with this? And there are these kind of moments in our lives that like in my life where it makes me think, okay, is this like, if I keep making these decisions, where it's gonna take me, right? That kind of a moment, right? Yeah. So yeah, what is success to you? For you?
Yeah, this is like one of those know thyself kind of questions.
Mm-hmm. I'm all about those questions.
in one sense, know thyself seems like, yeah, you ought to be able to know yourself, right? Like I'm locked in here, I'm me, right? But that might actually be the hardest thing to know, is to know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because since you're locked inside of you, you can only truly view yourself from one perspective, right? It's your perspective.
Yeah, so true, so wise.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons why we need people. We need other people, because at least, even if it's one other person, that one other person can see you from a variety of angles and perspectives, right? So even one person, even listening to one person can be a powerful way to learn more about yourself. But you have to be willing to listen, obviously.
Exactly.
And it has to be the right person.
Exactly.
But the success question, if you wanted to get in on that.
Yeah. I was in this personal development course 5-6 years ago. I just went through this whole personal renaissance, shall we say, exactly on the search of answering that question, who am I, right? And kind of went through a reinvention of self from that, stemming from that question. But one of the ways was doing personal development. I went to the jungle to just, I did all sorts of, quests, so to speak, and initiations. So in one personal development course, they would have like 8 people that would, you would meet, right? And you would share, this is how I experienced you, just like in a quick second. And man, it's getting feedback from, right? People that you just met, and you'd give that in return to each person. You really get a sense of, how do I come off, right? So that was really valuable. And you can't always have that outside of these sort of not contrived, but situations. So it's really important, as you said, to have people we trust, right, in our corner, whose perceptiveness we can respect, right, and discernment that we can respect. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the success question, what is success for me? So one of the challenges with pursuing anything is if you don't have some sort of definition of what is success, then even if you achieve really lofty, really high goals, you won't have a sense of fulfillment when you get there, because you didn't define it. You didn't say, this is what I'm trying to do, and I should know that. So when I get to this place, hey, that should be like oh man, I made it. This thing is happening, and everything. I remember when I was working on getting tenure, and a faculty member who came to same institution a year earlier than I did. So they had gotten tenure a year before I did. And so after I got tenure, we kind of sat down and we had a conversation. And because so much of which you have to just it's like a laser focus on this one thing for like 6 years. And at where I teach, the way it works is up or out. So if you don't get tenure, you're done. And you get one more year to look for a job somewhere else. But that's just the way that works. So it's a lot of pressure, and you have like all of your eggs in this one basket, and you're really focusing like a laser on this thing. And at the expense often of all kinds of things that you probably were doing and that you had other interests, right? So all that stuff just gets left, outside,
Yeah.
And so then it's like you get tenure, and nobody really throws a party for you or anything. It's not that kind of thing. I mean, you get to keep your job. That's good.
Woohoo!
It's a good thing. You get a pay raise. Okay, that's good. And
job security, right?
Job security. So there's reasons to put a lot of eggs in that basket and really focus on it, because it can set you up. And one thing that a lot of academics experience after they have achieved tenure is they'll actually get depressed. Okay, now, I'm not talking about clinical depression, but it's like a real kind of
like a slump or something.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm here now. Now what? Now what am I going to do? I got this thing that's great, and I in that conversation I realized that one thing that's necessary is whenever you have sort of accomplished something big, you need to erect a new set of goals, right? Something to look at.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what, in the grand sense, what success is, but what I've tried to do is I've tried to create, I have these dream goals, and at one point, a dream goal was to get a, position at a major university, as a professor, and then a dream goal was to get tenure, right? So, but once those things happened, then I created other goals, and I it seems like I have, because I have a lot of different things that I'm interested in. So, for instance, like with this interview series, the podcast, it started off. I started this at the beginning of the pandemic. I wanted to do something like this prior to the pandemic, but I didn't really have time to do that. I was too busy with a bunch of stuff. But then when that started, I was like, okay, well, this is an opportunity to do this. And then in the beginning of it, I was just kind of blindly just like, okay, let me interview some folks and see what happens. And then it started to take a little bit more shape. Now I have a clear idea of what I think success would be with this, as I look at some other folks and what it is that they're doing. But I didn't really answer any questions just there, but I did talk a lot.
Yeah, it's you shared your perspective and how you and your reflections, and that's valuable. There's so many threads I could pull there. Yeah, when you mentioned when COVID hit and you started this podcast, you really I see you've done a lot of episodes, so you've took the silver thread in this and kind of shaped it into this cup of goodness, and that's great. And and I see that you're not stagnating, you're moving forward, you're reinventing what you're capable of, and that is for me the juiciness of life, right? Because if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And so respect to that. And yeah, this idea of the goals that we set, and how these goals keep changing and moving, and we're like a donkey with a carrot in front of it, and just like going from one post to another, and never being truly fulfilled and happy is real, and in non-musical terms, they tell us you finish school, you're going to be happy. You're going to get to college, you're going to be happy. You're going to find a job, you're going to be happy. You're going to get a family, you're going to be happy. And all of these goalposts. And so when are you going to get happy? Right? So we create that ourselves, right? And this dream a lot of musicians have of becoming famous is an interesting, angle to look at, because a lot of performers, it is said that we weren't, I should speak for myself too, we weren't seen as a child or something, and so now we just want to be like, pay attention to me, right? Because in a way we're dealing with attention, right? People's attention. And so but I'm really grateful that we live in the 21st century, that we can now have these niches. We can reinvent what success looks like, right? We can create our own definitions of success. We can create our own
hierarchy.
Yeah, places. Yeah, how for example, what I'm doing right now, when I was in college, I didn't even know it existed, let alone back in Mongolia. Like I just didn't know. So it just shows me that the series of decisions and yeses that I made led me here, right? But it wouldn't have happened if I didn't say yes to those opportunities and offers that arrived. And also, this idea of you mentioned being laser focused on a goal, right? And for a long time for me, it was just really being comfortable making a living, doing what I do, and having these goals. And you talked about the opportunity cost of okay, I'm going to spend my time doing this, then I can't do that, right? And that's the cost of it. And the opportunity cost for me was I had zero social life, I had zero, my self-care routines and everything was terrible. I was like the video that I mentioned at the Bucharest Symphony. I don't even you can't even recognize that it's me, because I was so depressed at the time, and so, like overweight and all of that, and just took me all this time to get to a place where, okay, I can have goals. I can define what success is to me, and have like a good balance in my life. And I still haven't fully, gotten it because most of the time I'm sleep deprived. But there's just so much to do, and the world is moving. Yeah, the world is moving so fast, and we gotta catch up, right? You've heard of NFTs, right? All the rage right now.
No. Tell me what this is. You said NFT?
Yeah, there's. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I mentioned this. Is because if you mention that in certain circles, people are like, "I can't believe you're talking about this." But it's a non-fungible token, and it's a way to sell essentially digital assets, to collectors. So if Grimes, they for example, I read they sold their album for $6 million, right, dollars, and like so it's linked to Bitcoin and blockchain.
Yeah. Cryptocurrency. Yeah. Yeah.
So all of this is moving forward. All these new platforms are emerging, and they all require time on top of. I don't know about you. I gotta keep practicing. I gotta keep playing. I never stop. So it leaves little time to any other thing. It just requires so much. And I was in a panel yesterday listening to women in the industry who what sacrifices you had to make for your career, right? And it's all about the similar things, but going back to the success, and you're very you're right on the money in that it's linked to knowing ourselves, right? Know thyself is the very first question that requires answering, and I think my definition of success over the years has been changing, but I still, when I close my eyes, I see just being able to serve as many people as possible, inspire, uplift with my music, and that's our work as artists, right? To bring light to the world, and somewhere along my journey, as an artist, musician, singer, I've let some part of that go because I focused, as you said, so much on getting paid work, and some of the better works were in the soundtrack world, which is mostly behind the scenes. Sometimes in video game work, you don't even write who was the singer of it. You just sing, and that's it, right? And you're more of the behind the scenes person, and you've heard my voice in things, but you don't know who I look like or who I am, right? And so this year, my something I'm contemplating is, okay, so you've focused on that aspect. Keep it up. And how else now can you expand, right? So it's similar to your story. Yeah.
Yeah,
Still haven't answered that question too. You're right. We'll just keep contemplating it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the interesting conversations are not definitive answers.
Yeah.
But often more questions. Because asking the right question, is often more important than what the answer to that question.
Yes. That's all right. And the exploration of it can lead us to interesting places.
All right. Well, I'm having a good time.
Me too.
Yeah, it's a good time. This it is not. It's not usual. It hasn't been usual in my life to have certain kinds of conversations with musicians. In one sense, I think that musicians have a certain kind of sensitivity in, it's almost like a, I don't know, it's like earthy or something, like it's almost like atmospheric or something. Like it's not, is not as much that they could describe in detail what it is that is, or how that works. I don't get the sense that there's a lot of probing or asking questions about that. It's more like, I love to play. I want to play a gig. You know, let's talk about gigs. And often it's maybe the extent of the depth is in sort of talking about stuff like politics, right? Associations with other folks that are either facilitating or inhibiting, you know, your ability to do the kind of work that you want to do, right? And although I think that stuff is all important stuff on a just kind of a rubber on the road kind of way, I think that there's deeper questions to ask, which often are the sort of they're the sort of principles, ideas, you know, that are sort of undergirding everything.
Yeah.
Some kind of understanding of that stuff that can, you know, make your dealing with certain realities less, maybe a little bit less challenging. I'm not sure what I just said, but
no, I get you. That was actually well articulated. And let me ask you this then: what do you believe is your purpose as a musician?
Oh man, you're pulling out the big one. So, yeah, I mean, I'm, you know, one of my jobs is I am a minister of music at a church. You know, I'm a Christian. I have this sort of idea of everything that I do, trying to make it, it's, you know, an act of worship, right? So, you know, when I'm playing, when I'm writing music, when I'm teaching, when I'm in the presence of other people, when I'm by myself, you know, me as a dad, me as a husband, me as a friend, you know, I see all of this stuff as an opportunity. You know, it's all an act of worship, right? So if I sort of if I contextualize worship as only something that happens on Sunday, then I think I miss out on sort of I think what's really important. Like, the whole point of it, you know, it's not. So what's supposed to be happening on Sunday is sort of it's like the microcosm. It's saying, okay, this is the model, and then now do that everywhere. And you're gonna have to figure out what that means, because we're all individuals.
Yeah.
So, so purpose, I think, for me is. I think I would be lost without music, completely lost. I don't remember even choosing music. It just kind of was with me.
It's beautiful.
And so it seems like that has something to do with what I'm supposed to do. I'm a teacher. Even if I wasn't a musician, I'd be teaching something. That seems to be how I'm oriented. It seems to be why I'm interested in a lot of the details I'm interested in. Like stuff that nobody else cares about. Like analogies and stuff, you know.
But Kobe, you know, he said that attention to detail at the time you're doing it is high performance. Something like I'm paraphrasing it, and I take that with me all the time. So that is actually a gift, you know.
How about you? Why don't you just talk to us about purpose?
That is indeed one of the big questions, and it might not get answered today, right? And it's the exploration of it once again that leads to some revelation, right? Some personal aha moment, realization, and I love that you talked about your personal practice and how you view worship, right? And I've been curious and explored many different spiritual traditions of the world, and I consider myself very spiritual, though I don't belong to a particular denomination. But there's something that always has stayed with me from Hindustani Shastriya Sangeet, the Indian, Northern Indian classical music, is that you practice as a devotion to the divine. When you practice your instrument, it's your gift and communion with the divine. And when you play in front of people, it's an extension of that. Right. So then all the rest, the ego and the self, becomes immaterial, and just that channel opens, right? And so I think for me, the practice has been becoming that channel in everything that I do. You know, and of course it's hard to maintain because we're human and with this animal body, you know. But that is the intention and the purpose, right? So essentially for me, my purpose is to reflect the divine in all that I do, say, speak, right? And harmonize my environment, right? Because we have such incredible power as musicians, right? Our bodies are mostly water, and if you've seen a water vibrating, right, where we can just affect people's nature, just physically, emotionally, and on so many levels. And for me, it's the closest thing to magic that exists on this planet. Truly, you know, we're magicians and creators, and in many traditions, you know, the world was created with word, right? At the beginning with so and it's a vibration, right? And just the study of vibration is a lifelong study, my gosh, and how to utilize it, you know, for good. And so that has been my purpose. You know, some people call it vibrational medicine, or however you want to call it, you know.
Yeah, this is fascinating because in different words, in some of the particulars are different, but I think we just said the same thing.
Exactly. There's a song by this Australian artist, Darpan, and he says, I like to cover it, and as I support these spiritual development kind of experiences. Petals of the lotus, there are many, but the flower is just one. Philosophies, religions, there are many, but the truth is just one. And it just reminds me of this.
That's interesting. So, you know, I said I was Christian, and Orthodox Christian, and one of the sort of principles is that all truth is God's truth, right? So anything that has not been explicitly defined leaves space for other things, you know? And so there's this interesting sort of openness to I think different spiritual practices. One thing that's interesting out of that Christian tradition is the sort of monastic and, you know, ascetic tradition, fasting, a lot of fasting. You know, on the Orthodox calendar, there's 30 plus weeks of fasting, some kind of fasting. And this is actually not just for monastics, that's intended for laity. right? Just the, John Q. Citizen. Okay. So one thing I think that happens frequently in our culture, our society, American culture in particular, I'm talking about, is I've seen this sort of, people will say this thing. They'll say, the physical me, this is not the real me. I'm the person that's inside, And although I am the person that's inside, but I am the physical me too.
Yeah.
And the physical me is no less me than the person inside is me. And I think there's different reasons why people may sort of want to sort of not be associated with the physical them. But it seems to me that, there's everything is sort of connected, right? Like there's like a sacredness of creation, like the earth is a sacrament, and so then all that exists in physical reality, there's a reason for that. And I don't think it seems to be missing something to treat that as if that is sinful and I don't know. I'm struggling for other words, but that was the first word that came to me. But then somehow the inner self is the actual holy thing. But the outer self, that's the sinful. That's the kind of thing. I mean, with music, well, first of all, music is, as you said, this vibrations, and you can't experience vibrations or perceive them without the physical self, because that's how sound works. It is something that is happening that is physical. So I don't. So it seems to me that by minimizing the physical world in some way, we'd also necessarily be minimizing the power of music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's both, when you were talking about the inner self and outer self, and our bodies, what came to mind is the saying, we're not, I'm paraphrasing here, we're not, finite beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having an earthly experience, right? And that's the lessons are to experience also our bodies and earth and walk on this earth and how, we're, I believe, was it Oprah who said, we're walking inside God. Right. And I thought that was beautiful. So it's all, as you said, interconnected, the earthly and the divine. And there are these stories of how in certain traditions, how, the creator entice the soul into coming into the body by playing music, because that was a way to hear music, right? And that's one of the gifts of being human. And then there is such a thing as the music of the spheres, right, where the higher forms of music that we're all striving to achieve, right? And I tend to view life in harmonics also. When I was first learning music, you think, okay, plonk, one note. I grew up playing piano as a very Asian thing to do, classical piano. And first, you're very gross in what you do, as in large. You're looking at it as in huge particles and chunks. And then the better I get, the more refined I get, right? And I can feel in greater subdivisions. I can understand in higher frequencies, right? And so I feel like life is an ever refining process, right? I'm refining my understanding of these lessons and principles, and sometimes I'm learning the same thing again and again, and I wonder, why am I still learning the lesson? Because there's still something for me to learn from it. There's still something to come back to. There's still a way to refine my understanding of this particular subject. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All of that.
I'm wondering, to bring it back to the earthly, I'm hesitating to bring this up, but I do believe it's important because I've remained sort of diplomatic in how I express myself with regards to politics, with regards to what's happening in the world. I tend to be very, in a way, I'm only going to talk about the kind of subjects we've been discussing, but we do live in this world, and I'm wondering. So recently, the Atlanta shootings, right, has created a lot of uproar in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and we've been holding these really long marathon sessions of hearing people speak and dealing with how much we've been conditioned to speak quietly, toe the line, right, and all the history is now coming up, and a lot which in some ways echoes how your community has been treated in the South, and I believe it's important actually to speak about it and not to fear it, and to just shine the light of compassion and love into it. And I wanted to ask you, being who you are in this country, being a professor, being a musician, and you look like a large man from the screen, right? Mm-hmm. How have you experienced what happened last year? Mm-hmm. And how has this changed your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. In a political context, I've probably described myself as I'm a Black nationalist and somewhat libertarian, definitely independent. I have not had very much. I don't trust either the major parties. I don't think that they are interested in. They're not interested in doing anything that would actually help the Black community. And I think in large part, both parties have been complicit in sort of creating constructs that have driven a massive wedge between Black men and women. The way that our family structures in particular have been totally destroyed from state-sanctioned terrorism against our community for a long time. Yeah, I mean,
it's a big subject.
Yeah. So that's kind of. I don't see what's happened in the last year as really any different. I think possibly folks, I think they're more willing to have certain conversations, but I often question the motivation of that willingness. If it's not just fear, and of course, fear is not the, I would prefer to have conversations and hear what people actually think, mm-hmm. rather than a sort of externally coerced and forced response. based on fear, based on what is, politically correct, what the Overton window suggests that you're allowed to say. Because at least I would know then, where somebody actually stands, and then I can judge for myself if that's the kind of person that I want to associate with, or is that the kind of person that I should trust or not? It's a part of it is about self-preservation, family preservation. Yeah, I mean, one thing I think that has been totally just like ran past, and it's the same playbook, which is what part of the reason why it makes it sort of frustrating to see the same thing happen over and over. But so George Floyd was a black man, and maybe for a split second, maybe not even that, certain issues that were particular to black men maybe were being entertained, but notice that none of the conversation now, this far into it, and for the longest has been about black men in particular. So that's kind of an interesting sort of problem. But yeah, I mean, the way that I see things, I'm a Christian. I have a certain idea about providence, and if I'm supposed to have something, then I'm going to get it, and it's not going to matter who tries to stand in the way. And I've had that kind of disposition, largely because of my dad. My parents are still married. And that, I think, that's not the usual thing in the black community. But it's something that I have tremendously benefited from. He taught me to never make excuses. Like, I'm not allowed to make excuses. You just work hard, you do what you're supposed to do. You're aware of what's going on in the world, but I don't see, stuff that's happening as something that's going to hold me back per se. I don't look at it that way. I just try to persevere, and so yeah, that was kind of a long answer, but yeah, I mean that's kind of how I think I've been experiencing the stuff that's been happening. But again, like I said, it really hasn't changed. It's been the same experience as long as I can remember. It's the same playbook. The same stuff happens over and over and over. It's like and nobody learns anything from it. It's just the same thing over and over.
Thank you for sharing that. It's been.
How about you? How have you been doing?
Well, the recent last week, I'm educating myself. I'm learning more about what I can, and I'm listening to people's experiences, and this road that we're on, as minorities in a country, is an interesting road to be on, I'm learning, I'm educating myself, empowering myself, and by having these uncomfortable conversations, perhaps, right? Bringing to light, things that perhaps need to be spoken of in society, and not, be like, oh, well, we can't, we're polite, and what, I don't know what, right? I learned a lot about recently, how Asians were treated, when labor was needed in California to mine, as they were miners, and same, segregation laws, and have to have separate schools, and you can't marry, and just a lot of these repeating patterns, and educating myself and learning, and just right now, holding space in and giving space for people to express, right? And while we were holding these experiences for people to, and allies, and to share their experiences around what's been happening, I'm hearing a lot of, I haven't been speaking about this. I've been repressing, and now I'm expressing. I'm feeling fear. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people are resentful, and then just a lot of different traumas and things they're arising, and it's been simmering under the surface, and now it's these events kind of open them up, and I believe it leads to these movements of awareness, right? I think they are important. I believe in expanding the mindset, right, of the average person, of what is it like to have so as part of this helping score this documentary last year, and it's still in post-production, but there's a Chinese man, Zen teacher, Chinese American, asking a black man and a white man, what if you were born white? And what if you were born black? How would your experience been different, right? And having these conversations, and it's not that they're going to solve anything, and these are systemic, institutionalized kind of forms of perhaps even unconscious or conscious racism that's been so prevalent. But at least, I can do my small part of raising awareness. At least I can speak about it. I do what I can, and I will work on my patch of what's within my power, within my voice, and to just leave the place better than I found it. That's all I can do.
Yeah, that's all that any of us can do. And one of the beautiful things about music is that it gives us an opportunity to affect people at a deep spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the awareness thing is important. What's more important than awareness is actual, change.
Mm-hmm.
Is actually stuff changing. And I was sort of implying, at least, one of my frustrations is when you see it seems like a heightened awareness, but then things basically just go back to the same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be real specific.
Yeah.
So we had this last presidential election, and it was, bad choices. The Democrat and the Republican, it was both bad choices. It's like the election from before that. It was bad choices there too. And in particular, bad choices when it relates to Black men, what has happened to Black men. Black men are really the only unprotected group of minorities. I mean, because you can see policies that have been put in place, at least, to address a wide range of things, but there's not so for Black men. We just put a guy in there that was very much responsible for the '94 crime bill. And we celebrated. We said, oh yeah, this is way better. This is going to be so much better. Yeah. That doesn't seem like it's so much better to me. You know, in some ways, I would say it's worse. And then we put, and although there's a lot of celebration about this, you know, Kamala,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a person of color, she's a woman, and I think there's some symbolic reasons why there would be some celebration. But Kamala was basically complicit in the '94 crime bill, in that she was sort of like the rubber on the road that was actually implementing the policies that were disproportionately targeting Black men for longer sentences, and you know, so so in one sense, it seems like, okay, yeah, this is better. This is going to be good, and you know, at least you know we won't have this sort of toxic and poisonous like rhetoric coming out of the White House all the time, right?
That's huge, at least, yeah.
Right. But on the other side, it's like, but a lot of what has put a target on my back. So, you know, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
Was done by the guy that's in there. And I haven't seen any evidence that there's any real sort of come to Jesus moment on this. I think there's been some talking, but there actually hasn't been any changing of the policies that were put in place that have created a lot of these fatherless homes in the Black community, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a very complicated sort of issue, but as I've said, I've not been satisfied that either party is really interested in doing anything to help Black people. Now, I think one party talks a good game, but then when you dig in deeper, you find stuff like the '94 crime bill. So it's tough. I mean, you look this way, and you're like, okay, well, that's pretty bad over there. Well, let me look this other way. Yeah, it's not obviously bad, but it's still pretty bad over there.
Was it on Joe Rogan's podcast that someone said that America's Democrat Party is not leftist or almost quasi-communist as the right likes to say. It's actually center right compared to other places in the world. Thank you.
That's interesting.
Just the perspective of those in the spectrum, which is quite true. I mean, Bernie was a real kind of left. Right. And thank you for bringing it back to it's beyond awareness. From okay, now I'm aware. How am I gonna act from this awareness? What change is gonna come into place? And we're not working in government. We are musicians. What do we do, right? Just the last, this last year has brought it home to me that we don't live in a bubble, like where everything is interconnected, and there we need to be aware of what's going on. I have a friend who never reads a single piece of news and never reads anything, just completely in their bubble. And I totally respect their choice. And I've lived periods of my life where I'm just completely unaware, but also, it's disconnected from the reality, right? And the fabric of the society that we're living in. And, it's a real big hot topic potato that we got ourselves here. There's a game in Mongolia when you're cooking meat, right? You put it in this metal canister, really big, and you put hot coals and you put these chunks of meat and sometimes potatoes, and you cook it that way. And when it's been out of cooking for a bit, the hot coals are a little cooler, so they don't burn your hand, but it's still hot. So the children, they pass it around and they just kind of play with it. Oh, it's very hot. You get it. You give it. So some of these topics are, it feels that way, and yeah. So thank you for sharing your views on this, and it's I really respect and hearing, and I appreciate hearing your perspective on this. And bringing it back to the music is how do we, knowing this, right, or just knowing who we are in this society, in this world, how do we improve? Because there's some people who believe, music shouldn't be for a purpose, in the sense that it should be for its own sake, right? For art's sake. And then the people like Bob Marley, right? They believe it should be vehicle of change. I'm going to bring two gangs from my hometown and make them shake hands at my life, risking my life to do. So I'm wondering where you stand on this spectrum.
Yeah, maybe all of the above. It's interesting, so in jazz, so in the academy, this conservatory model is not really compatible with jazz, right? They sort of need different things. And there's been this massive struggle. There's been a struggle over the last, 40 years or whatever, 50 years since jazz has been sort of accepted, reluctantly accepted. And there's still all this sort of undertones, overtones, residual, biases against jazz. And I started thinking about this differently over the pandemic. And I started to realize that part of the rub is that, in large part, jazz has a different purpose than art music.
Than art music, you said?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, Miles Davis famously said, "Don't call it jazz." He says, "Call it social music."
Mm.
Right? And all of the commercial music and pop music, all of that, it is all descendant of jazz. All of that stuff comes out of jazz. So jazz implies a sort of commercial viability that classical music never has had. I mean, at least not in this country, right? I mean, if you look at the kind of subsidy that symphony orchestras receive, there would be hardly any that would exist. But that's not the case with jazz. Jazz would still exist because it's social music. Okay, so I think what actually has been happening is, although I think that there's some racial, bias, there is some other bias associated, but really I think what it is it's like it's almost like the commercial music versus the art music thing. I think that's really the more primary on the sort of molecular level what the struggle actually is. And again, those two kinds of traditions or forces, musics, whatever we're going to call them, categories, they need different things to survive.
By commercial music, do you mean popular music? Today's pop music? Is that what you mean?
So anything that has a commercial viability outside of some sort of government subsidies. If it can exist outside of government subsidy. Now, I'm not even suggesting that no classical music could exist outside of subsidy, but there hardly is any. Whereas, especially since popular music, rock and roll, R&B, hip hop, all of this stuff is descended from jazz. So it all comes out of that. And so the purpose of that music is different, right? And so it makes sense that a lot of this protest music, especially of the 60s, and you mentioned, Bob Marley, right? But all the protest music that we hear, it's not like classical music, right? It's like it's stuff that is on the commercial side, and so it's interesting, and I find myself sort of between the two because I love classical music. I'm trained as a classical musician and as a jazz musician. My doctorate is a saxophone performance in cognate and composition. It's a classical degree, I have classical recording, a classical recording now. So I see the merits of both, but I'm starting to understand what the sort of struggle has been between the two. So that didn't really answer your question. But
we seem to be exploring these questions, right? Because they're not easy questions, right? Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of threads we could pull there, and it's interesting how jazz, when first it arose, was the popular music of the time, right?
That's right.
And that was what the young people and the most popular music. So now that it's shifted, perhaps I wonder, maybe 100, 200, 300 years from now, jazz will become the classical music, right? There will be the classical repertoire, right? And already you have, I don't know, the repertoire from the real books or whatnot, right? And it goes back to what we touched upon, where there are these niches now. It's yes, you have what's popular in the Grammys, right? And there's someone like Esperanza Spalding who can come up there and play, right? And there are people who are coming from really underground places and coming up to play in the Grammys, right? And I feel like we're really redefining a lot of what commercial means, also, right? And how to finance the music, right? And I mean, for better or worse, because of streaming, the value of what we're providing has changed irrevocably, right? And I mean, there's no way we can live from streams unless you've got millions of, and then there's listens, but then there are people who would try to trick the algorithm by having very shorter songs. That's why current songs are shorter and shorter, because you get more likelihood of getting more listens, right? And there's a lot of threads to pull them. Certainly, 10, 20 years ago, very niche artists would have had trouble making a living. Now with different, Patreon or what have you, right? All these different resources, you can go back to kind of a medieval, way of creating art, in the sense of if you have a few, even if it's some wealthy patrons or a lot of patrons who are supporting you, like the Medicis used to back in Italy, right? Or Bach, right? All of the composers, their patrons were the church or the royalty or the rich, right? And so there's all these new ways that we're trying to redefine what it means to be commercially viable music, or, as you said, music that does not need subsidizing from the government to exist, right? Mm-hmm.
Music that wouldn't die if academic institutions died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, I think there's even if it's not a conscious awareness, I think there's a sort of subconscious awareness of the need of the institution. And so if anything sort of is capable of standing on its own 2 feet, it can be sort of intimidating. Mm-hmm. And I never thought of it in that context. I never thought of it that way, like I said, until the pandemic. And it's not because of the pandemic, it's because I had more time to think, because all of us have more time to think right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And new classical music, for me, what comes to mind is there's a lot of easy listening, like just focus music, piano music, like Ludovico Einaudi. He's like a pianist who plays kind of music that's soothing, and there's a lot of calming music, focus meditation music, right? Even St. Vincent has been releasing. But in terms of classical music, orchestral music, let's just say that, right? Orchestral music, I feel the soundtrack world is really fueling that. There's a whole dimension to that, right? Like video game scores, film scores, television scores, and for me, that's where really exciting compositions are being born, actually. Mm-hmm. Even in live situations, also. Mm-hmm.
Yes. We could keep talking. I think we could probably talk another 2-3 hours easily.
The spirit is willing, but the body needs some.
That's right.
Needs a break. Yeah.
So, anyhow, I definitely will have to have you back sometime. And I also have I do a live stream called Thunder's Thoughts, and that show is usually about an hour and 15, maybe. Maybe I could have you come for one of those sometime. I just think it's been a really fascinating conversation, and I would like to continue it at some time.
Agreed. Thank you so much for having me, and you're a fascinating conversationalist, and you expressed yourself in interesting ways, and I'm very had a wonderful time here. Thank you.
Well, God bless you, and be careful, be safe, be healthy.
Thank you. Likewise. And may the doors of opportunity keep opening for us, and may we be blessed in all ways.
That's right. All right. Have a good one.
Bye.